Hey Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I am doing great, and I appreciate your time this morning. And I'm really excited for this conversation. It's going to be another discussion about fire, financially independent, retire early. We had talked a little bit about that in episode 9. For those of you guys who want to listen to it, go back to that episode. But for you, you're actually living that, and so I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how your journey of where you found fire, how you were able to achieve it, and kind of learn some about you.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like your listeners may have a little bit of a background with fire, but just to kind of for people who haven't, basically this story for most people, and this was the story that I lived, is you save a high percentage of your income, and so instead of saving 10 to 15% like most people say, and then you can retire at 60 or 65, you just basically turn the volume up on that and save maybe 40, 50% of your income, and you can cut that time down drastically by putting that money into investments, which will then support you really indefinitely. As far as to how I found it, my wife and I, we just kind of were stumbled into it. So we were living a lot of these principles just because for the two of us, we both came from backgrounds where we didn't have a whole lot of money. And so when we got out of college and we each had professional jobs, I was a physical therapist and she's had a variety of jobs, but kind of we had parallel kind of career paths and incomes. And so we didn't have massive incomes. Like neither of us ever made a six-figure salary, even in our highest earning years. But we made, decent money, and we were just kind of used to not having fancy house, fancy cars, fancy vacations. So we kind of built our lifestyle on what we could live off of one of our salaries. And then we just started banking the other. And initially, we used the other to get out of debt. And then because it was working, we used it to save for a down payment on a house. And then because that was working, we just kept rolling that money into paying our house off quickly and then starting to invest. And 10 years later, we were in a pretty strong position where we had a paid off house and a six-figure net worth. But we still had no idea. Like we didn't think normal people like us could retire. And because we never took this stuff seriously, I never learned anything about investing, tax planning, retirement planning. And then we found out after thinking we couldn't have a kid that my wife was pregnant. And so that's when I
Well,
got really serious and I started finding these fire blogs. And a lot of people kind of had similar ideas that they wanted something different for their life to what I wanted. And they were writing about saving all this money. And it was kind of what I was already doing, but I just had to figure out the investing side. And
mhm.
so 5 years later, we kind of reached this point where we felt that we had at least enough financial independence. And I quit my job as a physical therapist. So I retired in 2017. And we moved from Pennsylvania to the mountains of Utah because we always kind of wanted to be like ski bums, climbing bums. And so that's kind of the lifestyle we're living now. We live in Ogden, Utah.
That's awesome. So 4 years ago, you kind of achieved that dream, and now you're able to do kind of what you want whenever you want, and that's literally the success metric of the money category. And being able to be financially independent, to do what you want when you want with whoever you want, and that's really awesome that you're able to do that. What has been the biggest transition since 2017 for you?
So I think where we're like talking, having this conversation and kind of hearing somebody who's done it might be valuable. I think a lot of people they find this fire message and they think, like some people they're just turned off on it. It's like, it's too frugal, I can't do that, or I have to have too much money, I couldn't do that. And people just write it off because a lot of times it's presented in a not maybe the most favorable light.
Hmm.
But even people that do find it and they latch onto it, I think they kind of have a different problem where they go too gung-ho on it, and it's like I need to cut every expense, get as frugal as I can, save as fast as I can, and then I'll be financially independent and I'll live well. And that really wasn't our story. So we were saving because it felt good for us. Like I said, for my wife particularly, it gave her this sense of security that we were building this wealth that she never had. And for me, like I never felt like I really wanted for anything growing up, but my family, we were frugal by necessity, and so we never got to travel and do things. And so with my wife and I, because we made the big decisions, right, like with our housing and our cars, like as we were saving all this money, we were also traveling the world, doing amazing things. We got into skiing and rock climbing, and we were doing the things we wanted to do. And so we had this feeling of security. And so 2017 comes, and like we're hitting this point where on paper we have more than we've ever had, and we should feel rich and we should feel comfortable. But like, because we were saving all this time and now you get to this point where you can quote unquote retire and now you start spending down your assets, it was terrifying for us. And so we actually started having all this tension in our
Mhm.
relationship, and we started having this kind of scarcity around money. So that's definitely something that we had to kind of figure out and work through.
Yeah, I agree. And touch on a couple things that I want to go into a little bit more, specifically the penny pinching mindset that a lot of people have. That's their number one, like kind of negative connotation that I feel like people have when I talk about fire or when anybody talks about fire. It's like, yeah, well, I want to do what I want in my 20s and my youth, and I want to get to do whatever I want. And you mentioned that neither you or your wife ever made a six-figure salary. So the other kind of myth is you have to make a lot of money in order to be able to retire early. So what is more important for you? Is it the becoming a high income earner when you're coaching people how to become financially independent? Is it to pay down their debts like you did? Is it to live a little bit more frugally and save like 40% instead of the 15? What is the best strategy in order to achieve it and to bust these kind of myths that are out there?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think my answer would be the math is the math, right? So like if you look at, and so we wrote a book and in there we have this chart. It tells you like if you save X dollars using some pretty conservative assumptions, like if you save 10% of your income, I think it takes you like 50 some years to become financially independent. If you can just up that to 15 or 20, you're now cutting that down to like 40. But if you cut it to 50%, you could be financially independent in like 17 years. And if you really wanted to be aggressive, I think it's like 70% to get you there in a decade. And so the answer is like math is the math. So but like you said, you have to it has to be sustainable. And so if you're miserable the whole time, then like, what's the point? So I think for most people, it's easier to earn a bit more. But you also, there's people, you can watch, I mean, like look at entertainers, look at athletes. You can make $5-10 million a year and go bankrupt. So you still have to find a way to live happily below your means, whatever those means are. And so, like in our case, we got the things that I think for 99% of the people, the things that are going to move the needle, your biggest expenses are your housing, your cars. And so, like, if you say, what makes me happy? I have to have the biggest, fanciest house that I can afford, then you're probably not going to achieve financial independence. If you define happiness as, I need to have, the newest car and I'm going to go lease it and have a $600 or $700 a month payment. But that wasn't our story. Like we knew, like we actually thought and got intentional about what will make us happy. And I mean, we lived in a decent house. It wasn't anything fancy. We didn't really drive decent cars. We had pretty crappy cars because we just truly didn't care about that. It didn't feel like sacrifice for us. Like I said, when we started doing this, it was really a security thing and we didn't know fire. We didn't have a goal. And so the things we really wanted to do, we were doing anyway. And so you have to find the way to make that work for you, whether that means earning more, whether that means cutting your spending. You have to get the savings right, but then you have to do it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree on that point. Like for me, I had getting out of college, I bought the Infinity G37, and it was really cool. I was young, and then like later on, I was like, this is not big enough for a trunk size. Like I can't buy anything, and it's bad gas mileage. And then I started thinking, older, and then I sold it and bought the Ultima cash, and then like because I don't really care for cars, I like traveling. And so, like to me, that's a no-brainer. But to a lot of people, like you're selling a nice car for a crappy car. But it's just you have to live. I think you said it beautifully. You have to do what you want with your money and make it enjoyable. For me, that's traveling and that's seeing the world. For other people, it's the cars, and other people, it's the houses. Some people, it's clothes. You just have to know that and spend on it only. And that'll help you kind of hit your budgeting goals for sure.
Yeah, and if I can kind of stop you there, because I think you said
Sure.
something really, really important, is like I think for most people, like you said, what you really want to do is traveling. And I think for most people, maybe it's not traveling, but it's some type of experiences, whether that just means having more time with your kids if you have kids, or if you have older parents, maybe with them, or maybe it is traveling, or maybe it's going to events, concerts, sporting
Mhm.
events. But I think those things, those are experiences, you're bonding with friends, you're around people. And I think for most people, they say that's what is important is these experiences, whatever
Yep.
those experiences might be. But then if you look at where people spend their money, most people, their biggest expense again is their housing. And they allow, like, you typically, the process when you're going to go get a house is you meet with a realtor. They say you have to be pre-approved to make an offer. And
Mhm.
then you get this, they say you can afford a $300,000 house. And so magically you start being shown all $300,000 houses. Like they don't say like, would you be happy in a $150,000 house? Because there's no incentive for them to. The people lending you money, there's no incentive for them to have you take a smaller mortgage. So you have to be intentional, and like, but most people aren't. And I don't honestly. Like I said, we didn't really have a goal or a plan, and we definitely made a lot of mistakes, like with investing and tax planning. But for whatever reason, that's just something that was intuitive for my wife and I, and so that's something we did from the beginning. But it's a shift, I think, for most people that you have to consciously make.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. Because then you're like, oh, and all of a sudden that's all you can get, and everything else is less than what you deserve is in
Mhm.
your mind, and that's not the right way to approach something that, again, is if it's not your big thing. Like if you love houses, then sure, but that means you have to make sacrifices in other areas. So I'm glad to see that's an intuitive thing that is puts you on the right track. But for financially independent, right? That word itself, the first part of fire, it's not really a number because it depends on the lifestyle you want to live. And curious of how you define it. Is it like not needing to make any more money actively besides, like, investment growth and either real estate appreciation, or is it like you can make it with only working a little bit? Kind of explain to me what financially independent. When did you know you hit the number?
Yeah, so I let me answer it this way. So I think like financial independent, retire early, fire, it gets lumped together, right? And I think there is a point, like if you're going to retire, you do have to have a pretty good grasp on, can you, before you walk away from a career that it might be a one-way door and you might not be able to go back. So I think you do have to really put some thought into that. Like, can I truly live indefinitely without an income? Can I cover my healthcare expenses? Can I do all these things? And that's a harder question. I view financial independence really as more of a continuum where, so like I talked about, like with my wife and I, we started very early, and really it was a desire for us to get out of debt. And so we were debt free in our early 20s by the time we were married.
That's awesome.
And so at that point, my wife was, she was a year out of school. She worked full time while going to school at a bank, and she had an opportunity to become a bank manager, or she had an opportunity to take this really entry level job with this. She had a math degree, and she had a chance to take this really entry level job with a actuarial firm who did like pension plans. And like that path had so much potential growth, and the bank manager, you're kind of pretty close to the top of the chain already in the bank. And so it was pretty close pay. She actually made a little bit more at the bank, but because she had that freedom, she was able to take more risks. And we can kind of go through our lives like that. Like I did the same thing coming out of school. I had a much more secure job. I could have worked at the VA hospital, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be in orthopedics and sports medicine. And a lot of people want to do that. And so you get paid less. And then I also went with a startup guy who just started a clinic, and I didn't even have a guaranteed salary, but I was able to take these risks very early on. And because we did these things and we had this freedom, we were able to develop our lifestyle sooner. So I think even just being debt free has a element of financial independence. And then like when we got to the point where we, like I mentioned, we were a decade in and we found out my wife was pregnant, we definitely were not at that point where we could retire. But we were definitely at a point where she was just like, after having our daughter and realizing how much she liked being a mom, she's like, I don't want to go back to full-time work. And she never has. She's worked part-time since that time. Like she quit her full-time job then, and she's been working part-time. And then so we've kind of had this freedom to make these decisions throughout, and it kind of, your financial independence just builds and builds. And I would look at it that way more than financial independence as a goal or as a number where, it's a dichotomy where one day you're not financially independent and the next day you are. Because I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, and they underestimate the power that even just being debt free or having a little bit of money that you can pursue different opportunities provides you.
Yeah, 100%. Because that my next question is going to be like market volatility, right? Let's say a lot of your assets are in the stock market, for example, and it crashes 20%. All of a sudden, your numbers if you're going to have a bunch of dividend stocks and stuff like that will go down. And a lot of people maybe experience that multiple times, whether that be the 2000 crash, the 2008 crash, or the COVID kind of dip in March of 2020. That kind of fluctuates a lot of things. So how do you kind of handle that piece?
Yeah, so I think it really depends where you're at in the journey. Like, my understanding is your audience is probably mostly younger. They're probably mostly just starting to accumulate money. And
Correct.
so, like, when I was in that phase, I totally didn't care what the stock market did, because there really was no risk. And when the stock market, if it dropped 50%, and I was investing in 2008 when it literally did drop 50%, and that was one of the best things that ever could have happened to me personally. I don't mean to say that lightly, because a lot of people that were in or nearing retirement, that destroyed them. But for me, that was the best thing. And that's because, again, I was a physical therapist. My wife, by this time, she moved on to a different career, but she was in like government contracting. So our careers were totally uncorrelated. And so even if one of us lost our job, we would have been fine, because we were only living on one salary. And so like we were pouring as much money as we could into our investments at that time, because there really was no risk. We didn't need that money. Now today, my wife works part-time and I kind of make a little bit of money off the blog, but basically our investments are what we need and we can't afford to lose half. And so it's a different calculus. So now we have more, we have some bonds in our portfolio. We actually have a little bit of gold in our portfolio, and we are working part-time also, just because, if we do get that major correction, which I mean, I think a lot of people think is overdue, we wouldn't want to spend the same amount from our portfolio while the values are depressed. So yeah, you have to kind of look at where you're at in the cycle and then develop a plan that makes sense. But yeah, if you're just starting out, I mean, who cares if the stock market crashes? That's probably the best thing that can happen to you.
Oh yeah, agreed. I definitely got serious about my investing strategy. When the March 2020 happened, I had just moved from a job to a job, so I had transferred my 401k into an IRA, and then had full control as cash, and then everything crashed. So it was like, oh, perfect. I just bought everything, and obviously you say that a little bit. It's hard because a lot of people lost a lot, but for some people, it always works out. So it's definitely a market volatility can be used both ways. But what about like other stable stuff you get in a corporate environment? You mentioned health insurance a couple of times. Obviously, you have a kid now, and they tend to get more sick than adults. So, health insurance is a big thing that when you're out of corporate, you don't you have to pay for that yourself. How do you kind of factor that in?
Yeah, so I think like if you are looking to leave the normal corporate life, the normal job with benefits, that's the biggest challenge for speaking to, I'm assuming mostly U.S. Americans, which is my situation. That is absolutely the biggest challenge. And I think the answer, I think everybody is looking for that one size fits all answer, but there is none. And I think you just have to kind of figure it out year to year. If you can get to the point where you don't need a lot of income, then you can use, as the system currently stands, at least. And again, this is what makes planning challenging. Also, is that it's not a stable system, and this law is under attack. But the Affordable Care Act, or it's sometimes known as Obamacare, um, it provides pretty generous subsidies for health insurance if your income is below a certain threshold. And so long as you don't need to earn a lot of money, then you can get your healthcare pretty cheaply. For us right now, my wife, like I said, after she had our daughter, she started working part time, and she kind of likes that. She works from home, she works remotely, she works part time, and we're able to get our insurance through her. So uh, through the current, we've not had to buy our insurance yet, but that will be our next step. Is probably going to the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, nice, nice. And so we mentioned in your blog, and you've talked about it a little bit. What is your blog? Where can people find that? And I wanted to ask a few questions about some of the stuff that I've read on your blog.
Sure. So my blog is called "Can I Retire Yet?" And on the blog, I probably write, and I think you'll find I write a good bit about investing, and if people have questions about that, I do write a fair amount about that. But I tend to write more for people at the stage where I am now, where you're making that transition, where you have built some wealth and you're looking to, whether it's retire or do a mini retirement or just change paths. I kind of focus more on those type of topics. But in my book, it's called Choose FI, Your Blueprint to Financial Independence. That's where I really, if you're kind of just finding this and looking and figuring out how to get started, that's really, I kind of target it to the 20-year-old version of myself, and kind of a lot of the things we talked about that I got right. And we've profiled a bunch of different people, and look at that stuff, but also mistakes I've made. And I could have done things a lot better had I known things back then that I didn't know. And so we kind of talk about that. And that's really, the book is kind of more targeted to a younger audience. It's more starting out, that probably would be more the people that are listening to this.
Yeah, definitely. I think our audience, range from mid 20s, early 30s, being the target audience here, and most of our listeners, if they want to start the journey of financial independence, they don't know where to start. They pick up your book, or they want to have a session with you to understand more. What would be kind of like the most important things that they need to learn about? Is it their mindset about fire? Is it, kind of assessing where their financial picture is? Like what is the first two or three things that they need to handle?
Yeah, I think absolutely mindset. So in the book, we broke it down. So there's really only three levers you can pull, and I kind of mentioned these already. But you can spend less, you can earn more, or you can invest better. But before you ever start doing that, you really have to kind of get your head wrapped around like, why are you doing this, and can you do it? So yeah, we devoted the whole first section of the book before we got into anything tactical to just developing your mindset. And again, like the book is not just my story. I have two co-authors, and they have the Choose FI podcast where they interview a lot of people who have achieved financial independence, and we look at all of their stories and kind of take bits and pieces that I think are going to resonate with different people. And so, yeah, I think it's developing that belief and having that story that you can do it, because if it's not an overnight, it's not a get rich quick. It's a decade to 2 decades of just doing things a little bit differently and then stacking them on top of each other. So I think that's the first step. And then if you actually, once you have that and you actually want to get started, I think the first step is you just have to get honest with yourself, and you have to kind of look at where you are and where are you starting. So if that means you have nothing, maybe it means you're $50,000 in debt. But a lot of people, just kind of like people, if you want to lose weight, but you don't want to ever step on the scale to see where you're starting. And it's hard
Mhm.
to know if you're making progress. It's hard to know what to do if you don't know where you're starting. So I think just it could be as simple as getting a piece of paper and just writing down like, what do I owe, what do I own, and like kind of, do I have a positive net worth or a negative net worth, how much am I earning? And then it kind of, as you start to see the picture, where to start for you. Like, do you need to earn more? Do you need to cut your spending? Do you need to get out of debt? But you don't know that until you have your own individual picture kind of laid out on a piece of paper.
That's fair. And if somebody sees that and just play a little bit of devil's advocate, and they're like, this is a lot of work. I don't know if I really want to kind of sell people why it's important to have this kind of stability, even if you're not going to retire early. I think just being the financially independent, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, it's kind of freeing, but how freeing is it if you can put that into words?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, yeah, it's absolutely work. It's not, again, it's not a get rich quick scheme, but I think it's a lot more work to spend your whole life. Again, I'm 45 years old. I've been retired for 3.5 years. I ski 50 or 60 days a year. I have an 8-year-old daughter who, like we were just talking, I said when she gets up, I have to go up. We'll have breakfast together. We play checkers today, every day. We go out and do all kinds of stuff together. So she's like the focal point of, or a focal point of my life, at least. I'm doing the things I want to do, and I've bought 20 or 30 years back because I did some little things. I read a couple of books about investing. I made a couple of big decisions with our housing and our cars correctly. And so, yeah, I mean, you do have to be intentional. It takes some effort, but I think it's a whole heck of a lot harder to ignore things and to just go about your life and wake up when you're 65 and say, okay, now I can start living. And that's not guaranteed.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, your health may not be in the best shape or things may close down. It's just it's not good to wait that long, right? And that kind of brings me into a question I normally like to start with, but I get excited when we talk about fire, something that I'm always really passionate about. So I like to see the five categories of success. It's a money, career slash purpose, relationships, physical and mental health, and happiness. And obviously they're all interrelated and they're all part of the overall goal. But if you can rank them in terms of your importance, how would you do that, Chris?
That's a tough question. I think at the top of the ladder for me is like happiness, and I would kind of maybe expand on that and say like feeling fulfilled and having joy. I mean, I think there's different elements of happiness, but I think that's what we all want. Is it's kind of vague, I guess, of a concept, but I think when you have it. And so I think we all want to get there. And I think probably the most important things, at least, and I'd say actually not just for me, but this is pretty universal, I think, is relationships and health. I think like we've all seen like in the past year or two with COVID, how hard it is when you're isolated and you can't be around the people you want to be around. And I think just for all of us, when you don't have your health, life is just harder. So I think those things are really going to contribute the most to your happiness. And I would say money and career probably I would put at the bottom of the ladder. But that being said, I'm at a pretty good spot in my life. I think like if you don't have enough money, it's much more important. So I don't mean to make light of that at all. And that's why I write about what I write about and talk about what I talk about is, if you don't have enough money and you are scrapping just to pay off your debt and to put food on the table, money can be a major source of stress. And so I don't want to downplay that, but like once you reach a point where you have enough, then money and career, those are really more of I think a means to an ends to, be able to do the things to enhance your relationships and enhance your health, and those things lead to happiness.
Yeah, I agree. I have that in a little bit of a reverse order, but with the same kind of overall message being happiness is dependent on the other four. And so it's why, like for example, you need to be financially independent so that you can do what you want, which will in turn help your mental health, which will in turn help your happiness, right? And it's like that's how they're all interconnected. But it's always a fun question to see how people prioritize it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think
Um,
like career, like if you're like again, kind of getting back to just putting your head down to get to financial independence, like if you're spending 40, maybe 50 or 60 hours a week and you're just miserable at your job to get to financial independence, like there's a lot better ways, like slow down and
yeah.
find something. Cause yeah, that's, you can waste a decade of your life doing something you're absolutely miserable at. And I think that's probably not very wise.
Agreed. Agreed for sure. And you had mentioned your investing strategy a little bit, and I'm curious to see the whole. Everybody talks about diversification of their portfolio and stuff like that, but us getting started right now as millennials, maybe we don't have enough to quote unquote diversify, right? And we're trying to gear up our gears to pay off debt and build up some capital in order to invest. How would you recommend? Were you all in on one of them, whether it be stock market, real estate, et cetera, and then diversified later? Did you just start diversifying with really baby positions and then build them up simultaneously? What is the best approach that way?
Yeah, so I think people overcomplicate diversification. I think you can go out and buy one index fund, whether it be like just a index mutual fund or an ETF, so like a total stock market
Mhm.
um, fund, and you own a share of every single company that's publicly traded in the United States. And so you're widely diversified, and you can do that, just put money into that every month, whether it be in your 401k or in just a taxable brokerage account, and you're extremely diversified there. And then if you want to add a second, like an international fund, now you own thousands more companies, like basically everything in the world. And then as you start to build some wealth and you need to maybe start taking a little bit of risk off the table, you can add like a total bond fund. So if you do those three funds, you really can't be much more diversified that as far as everything that you can publicly buy. So, that was kind of my approach whenever we were earning and saving a lot. I didn't want to spend time on real estate. I didn't want to spend time on anything else. And so, if you do those three things, you don't have to worry about. You hear all these just different fads and crazes that are coming and going. But if you just take a really simple approach, you're widely diversified, and I think that's going to be good enough for 99% of the people over time if you're saving enough money. And then if you're not saving enough money, and we talk about in our book, like there's three paths that I have seen be really consistently reliable and effective to get to financial independence. So if you don't have a high enough savings rate that you can just invest in these passive investments, then I think investing in your own personal business or investing in real estate are also very valid strategies to get to financial independence. But both of those, as particularly with a private business, maybe you have all your eggs in one basket, so you have a lot more potential for growth, but there's also a lot more risk with that. So everything kind of comes with trade-offs. And I think it's just worth taking your time to think about that. And I think that's probably one of the strengths of the book. I think people overcomplicate investing. And I think if you sit down and kind of understand like what are the paths you can take and what are the trade-offs that come with each of them, I think that really would help a lot of people starting out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely gonna grab a copy of your book. I assume you can find that on Amazon.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon or anywhere you get books, and just kind of to not dodge your question. So like I did focus solely on paper investments, just basic simple index funds.
Mhm.
But now that I've gotten to this point where we're quote unquote financially independent, we are looking at kind of that business route. Like we
Mhm.
thought about real estate, and it's just kind of something that doesn't fit our needs, and you don't need to do everything by any means. But we did want to have some more diversification outside of public markets because everything's just kind of crazy right now. Interest rates are so low, you just don't get much money when you buy any kind of bonds without taking a lot of risk. And stocks are so expensive. Again, you don't expect they're going to do as well as they have in the past right now. and they also don't produce much in the form of dividends. So just starting a little business, a hobby business, it doesn't need to make a lot of money because we don't have a lot of needs because we have our expenses so low. We have a paid off house. We don't have car payments, anything like that. And so yeah, I've been investing in my own business through the blog and through writing the book, and just that little bit of income, it makes a difference. Again, where you don't have to. I think people think, you can go out and it's easy money to start a blog or a podcast. I'm sure you could attest to this, but it's a very inefficient way to make money. But it's a great way to make connections and to learn. And over time, it can become profitable. And if you don't need to make a lot of money, it can be worthwhile. And that's what it's been for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Literally, you just took the words out of my mouth. Like, that's why I love doing the podcast, right? It's I get to meet people, have these conversations that I always wanted to have, and continue to just learn, because books and podcasts, other podcasts obviously have been extremely influential in my life. So I wanted to kind of reap some of that as well when I had these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of that, is there any few books that have kind of inspired you on the way when you were starting to learn about fire, when you're finding out these message boards and then other blogs years ago, or even now, any favorite books or podcasts that you listen to?
Yeah, so I mean, so kind of the idea for my own book is I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, and
Hmm.
so if people aren't familiar with him, he just interviews people from all walks of life who are very successful, and then he turned his interviews into this book. It's called Tools of Titans, where he just took kind of key lessons from everybody. And that was kind of the impetus for my book because there was so many people. So I mean, I can start listing a bunch of fire bloggers, but that's kind of what the idea for the book was. I wanted to interview these people because I can't say that there was one specific person, but I took bits and pieces from all of them. And then, so the Brad and Jonathan, they started this podcast, my co-authors, they started this podcast called Choose FI. And they did exactly that. They started talking to these people I wanted to, and they were asking the questions. So I just reached out and I said, that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to turn into a book. Would you want to work together? And so that's basically exactly what my book is like all the people that I think are the best, the people that most influenced me. And then we put them together with all the key principles. So yeah, that's what that is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And where can they find more about you to connect?
Uh, yeah, so my home on the internet again is Can I Retire Yet and caniretireyet.com.
Mhm.
And it's a blog I publish every Monday, and I'm very responsive. I have an email contact on there, and I have comments on my most recent posts, and I'm very responsive to readers. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. Awesome. And if gun to your head, one last tip that you have to give, nobody takes anything else from this interview, besides this last tip, what would that be?
Start. Just take action. I think you can hear stories and get inspired, and then go to the next podcast and hear a different person and get inspired, and then you go to the next podcast or read the next book. And I think that's where a lot of people spend their time, and you wake up a decade later in the exact same place. So, like I said, I think the one thing to do, like you asked me before, is just start taking an inventory. Sit down when you're done with this and just do your net worth. Like how much, where are your liabilities? What do you owe? What do you own? Like what assets do you have? What investments do you have? How much money do you have in the bank? And just sit down and start right there and just look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do? But I think you have to start somewhere, and it's easy to kind of spin your wheels and spin your wheels. And again, like I said, wake up a decade later in the same place you are right now.
Yeah, knowledge accumulation is an interesting trap. You get inspired by reading and learning more, but you want to learn more because of that, and you never actually take the action. So I think that's an awesome tip, and I guess we should probably leave it at that. And Chris, I love this conversation. I really appreciate your time, because these types of conversations need to happen more often. We don't really have money conversations enough as a society, but you never realize what's missing out there if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I kind of mentioned before, but like I was able to achieve financial independence in my early 40s with a normal job and a normal background. And that sounds kind of crazy and extreme, but I actually and this sounds a little bit odd to say, but I mean I could have done it without sacrificing anything probably 5 years earlier if I would have just learned some basics with investing and tax planning. I mean, there's just so much stuff that we don't know. And yeah, so that's kind of what gave me the passion to do this, is just kind of unlocking that freedom for other people. So yeah, I hope people take something out of this and follow up on it.
Definitely. Will do. Thanks, Chris.
It's been a pleasure.